Hey everybody, welcome back to Fix the Rust Bucket. In our last video, we went over replacing your inner rocker, how to get the old one out, put the new one in. This video, we're gonna get right into it. Now we're gonna start repairing the A-pillar on the truck. The inner skin of the post, I damaged it myself trying to pull out this. It didn't work. So that's the reason why I have to replace the inner skin on the lower end here. When we get to the outer skin, the bottom hinge was moved. The top hinge was not. It was still lined up. My thinking though, I don't want to cut this pillar, in half here and try and line this hinge up with the top hinge, running the risk of this not working out and the door not lining up. So I figured what I'm going to do is we're going to cut just below the antenna mount, but above this hinge when we get ready to replace the outside. Same thing on this outside skin of the pillar. That way when we go to install the new outer skin, used part, but the new outer skin, this hinge and this hinge are already lined up on this. And I don't have to worry about trying to make sure it's correct measurement wise, off a little bit, hoping that the door does or doesn't go in right. But before we can get to this, we've got to cut out a little bit more, get to the inner skin that I damaged, and get that replaced. If you like this kind of content, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so when I post another video, you'll be notified. We have a lot more to come. This truck's getting close to being wrapped up, and I'm excited. I can't wait. I want this truck out of the garage. I'm going to get the 88 Ford Bronco in here, which is going to be a complete rebuild on that truck. But for now, let's get started with this. All right, so I'm going to start off with drilling out these spot welds just below where the dashboard meets. Same thing with the ones on the front here. All right, so the way I'm doing this, and with the dashboard still in there, I've got to be mindful that I don't go too far in. This bottom spot weld is clear from anything on the dashboard. This one is not. I don't want to go too far with the drill bits in there, running the risk of damaging something in the dashboard, causing more work. All right, so after this first one with that grinding wheel and not the correct tool to do this, I'm finding it's actually going to do more damage than I really want to do. It's actually damaging the inner skin. So plan B, we're going to drill out these spot welds, and we're just going to do an oversized bit and go as far as we can till the skin separates from that spot weld. And that actually worked out really well. That few taps up here at the top, all four of these right here popped. Just got the bottom one down here at the get removed. All right, so all 5 of these spot welds are cleared from the inner skin. Since I didn't have the right tool, we tried that first. It didn't work. You're gonna see when I cut this out, I got a big hole that I gotta fill in. But this worked, and it left metal on the back side, so when we go to weld in the new outside post, we have somewhere to weld it to. For now, we can go ahead and make our cut, removing this piece, exposing the inside. All right, sorry guys, but I just realized my camera had shut off while we were doing some work and I didn't notice it till just now. So I'm gonna backtrack on what I was doing, show you what I did, and to where we got to this point here. This is the new outer skin. So before, this was one full piece. Like so. We're only replacing up this far. I'm going to stay below the bolts that mount the dashboard. There's no damage up here, only that damage I did down here. So we're going to cut across here and remove the lower section of it, putting it back in. So I took the solid piece, ran a piece of tape across it to get a straight line, and took my saw to cut that out. Get myself a nice straight cut. Also, what was missed, right here where the holes were previously drilled out on there and on this lip right here, we welded them up, sanded them back down so they're solid metal again, giving us a solid surface when we go to reinstall the outside skin. So first, we're going to go ahead and insert it back into here where it wraps inside the floor pan curve, up against the inner rocker. We're going to line up. Now we're just going to do the best we can and get a close proximity of where we're going to cut. We're going to cut just under that and remove everything and then put this in place to get our final cut. So with that, we're going to line everything up, just tapping it around. So now we have it roughly in the position where we want it to be. This curve, can't really see it there. That curve's matched with this curve. We got that lined up, and we also have the bottom end here lined up. And you can actually, well, I can see, you're not gonna be able to, but you can actually see some of the spot welds that go to the body mount underneath. So we're in a good location. We'll mark this off and cut that out of the way. And take our pen, just hold this a little bit in place. Make sure we're where we want to be. pull this out of the way. There's our line. Now, it was done with a marker, so it could be a little bit higher than it should be. We don't want to have a big gap in here because it'll be very difficult to fill back in welding. We're going to cut just below it, and that way we can refit the new piece in there and get our exact cut mark. So now we're going to drill out these 5 spot welds here and put a cut across there. All right, so now with our line in place, I'm going to take a tape like I did on the other piece. I'm going to put a straight line piece of tape across here to get the straightest cut possible on here. So we're going to go about 1/4 of an inch below the marker line. It's going to be a little bit more difficult here because of this bend in the metal right here. So let's start on the other side. Not liking that at all. So we'll start over. Didn't look very straight. All right, so with our tape in place, we're gonna go ahead and start cutting and remove this lower piece. All right, so with that cut, we're gonna pull it off. Now on the inside right here, just on the inside of the firewall, there is seam sealer on this. It's gonna be a little difficult for me to get in there due to this rubber mat and the foam padding underneath there. So we're gonna do what we can to pull it off without damaging the firewall too much. And we'll see what happens. We might be able to bend this down out of the way and we might have to pick it off, but we'll see. So we're going to pull this out of the way. It's got a good bite on it. And we're going to try and chip away at the seam seal. That piece removed. Put that to the side. I'm going to clean up the seam sealer now so we can reattach the new piece on there correctly. Later on, we're going to have to get in there, reseal this. All right, so with the seam sealer removed, we're going to get our replacement part over here. We're going to get it again. I'm going to tuck it into the corner here. I'm going to basically install it, but we have to still make one more final cut up here. But we're going to install it the best we can where it's supposed to be. Make sure everything lines up. Down on the bottom here. Down here, remember when we took this all apart, this post comes in and lays on top of the floor pan and then over top of your rocker, inner rocker. The foam's in the way on this one here, but there's your line. Same thing as the old one. There's your line where the inner rocker sits. We're going to go ahead and give this a few taps down, seating that right in. You can see, and get you a close up here real quick. You can see right here, it's lined up in the cut already, right there. Now, it's not, this cut right here is perfect. Over here, we still have to remove some more of the metal. All right, so with that in place, before we cut, we're going to go ahead and clamp the part down so it doesn't move on us, and we can get one clean cut on both pieces. Clamp it down here on the bottom. And clamp the other spot right here on the firewall. So with those two corners clamped in, I'm going to clamp it one more time here on the firewall. Push the panel in as tight as I can. Clamp it down there. So that's got that held in pretty tight. I can't clamp it up here because we have to cut up here. Now we're going to go ahead and do the same cut we did a minute ago, but now this time we're going to cut using, instead of a tape line, we're going to use the new part as our line to cut. So that's cut out of the way. Now, this is where I was stressing on the last video with the outer rocker mark and this mark right here. As you can see, the mark is still about 1/8 of an inch above where we actually put this piece in. That is just a guide. That mark is just a guide for you to start doing your cuts. All right, so now you can see with the cut, it's the thickness of that saw blade right here, which is, I don't know, 1/16 of an inch. And we'll just come back in and start tack welding all that in. So the next step in this process is going to be we're going to just pull this piece off. We're going to get all the edges sanded down, any metal burrs out of the way and cleaned up all the way around. Also, right down here, now we have to reattach the inner skin to the rocker. So we're going to go ahead and just, like we did on the inner rocker, mark our weld points. Now all those weld points, we'll know where to clean off the inner rocker, the paint. Along here is just going to be this whole edge, and then the edges of the outside of the firewall and the inner skin. So with all of our cuts done now and the paint removed where we're going to be putting the welds, everything's prepped, ready to go. This piece here, same thing. I did take and lightly sand it across the top and across the bottom of where we did the cut. That way when we go to fit it, it does fit a little bit better, making it cleaner to weld back together. On the inside, you're really not going to see that in the truck, but I did prime and paint that red. So with all the prep work done, we're ready to reinstall this in the truck. Let's get it lined up and start welding it back in. Just going to eyeball it up for now. When we start welding it in, we'll keep an eye on this to make sure that it stays lined up. Looks good. Put that in, come up to the front here. Front's actually looking pretty good too. We're going to clamp that in now too. So with those two clamps in place, we're just going to go ahead and put some clamps in around the bottom to keep the rest of it from moving. Okay, so with it all clamped in, we're going to start with just throwing a few tack welds around it in different locations to hold it tight and secure, get the clamps out of our way, and then start filling in all of our weld points. Okay, so that's as far as I'm going to go with cleaning up the welds on the inner skin. And on the outside here, I'm not going to spend the money on a body filler to cover this up. This outer skin of the pillar is going to cover this all up inside here. The outer rocker is going to cover all of this metal up in here, and this part here is going to be covered up over the fender. None of this will be visible at any time, even with the door open. My only concern with this panel here is that the welds penetrated both pieces of metal, making them, fusing them back into one piece. All right, so with it all taped off, the holes taped off so no paint penetrates through the backside here and hitting everything. We're gonna get 2 good coats of primer on here, covering up the metal, sealing it in. And then once the primer's dried up, I have a red, doesn't match the truck, but I'm not worried about that. Again, this isn't gonna be seen. We're gonna spray paint it red. Then we'll come back once the paint dries, clean off the spots we need along here for the outer skin to get welded back on. Okay, so with our 2 coats of primer put on there and dried up, I've got 2 coats of nice new shiny red put on here that we'll never see again. I gotta let that dry up, and then we can start prepping the metal and remove the rest of the outer skin here of the pillar so we can install a new one. All right, so that's gonna wrap it up for this part of the repair. While the paint dries, I'm gonna get everything cleaned up, reorganized. Next video, we're gonna be working on the hinge part of the outer pillar, temporarily weld it in place, make sure that the door shuts correctly, and then once all that's done, completely weld it back in. Then we can move back onto the lower rocker. Don't forget, hit the subscribe button right here and notification bell. That way when I post another video, you'll be notified. In the meantime, you can go ahead and just check out some of my other videos.